Awesome. So welcome to the October meeting for the PTA board at Star Academy. I don't think we need to go through introductions because we all know each other. But I'll just, for those who are watching the recording, we're joined by our co-vice presidents, Lawam and Jamie, our treasurer, Jenny, our Title I chair, Ulissa, our school principal, Dave Gonzalez, and our school vice principal, Jody Friedman. And we should have some other folks joining up. But this meeting, we are doing a lot of stuff because this is our first formal meeting since electing the board. Again, congratulations to all the new board members. And also the new Title I committee chairs and alternate. For folks who are not in attendance, I think Jen might still be jumping on and they might be in transit right now, but Brenda is on vacation. She's on a cruise ship, so she's not going to be joining us. And Liv, our Title I alternate, may be joining, but in the second half, because she has a prior engagement. So for those who are new here, I just want to quickly go over how the board meetings work, what the purpose is. This one's a little bit of a special board meeting because we're going to be reviewing our annual budget, which is something we typically do at the end of the year prior, but we'll talk about that while we're doing it a little late. And then also too, we'll go into a different format than usual because we have guests. We have our principal and vice principal to engage on the budget conversation. So it'll be a little bit of a different agenda than we normally do, but I'll explain all that in a little bit. So typically the board meetings, why we meet up once a month, the primary goal of the board meetings is to set the agenda for the general meeting. And that seems like a silly reason to have a meeting. At times you're like, oh, why are we having a whole extra meeting to do that? But agenda setting is hard to do. And if we go into a general meeting without a well-structured agenda, then general meetings are not as successful, right? They're not going to be as productive. Also, we strategically place the board meeting a week or a week and a half prior to the general meeting. So there's also some business that we have to handle. So if there's events that are happening that month that we need to reflect on or make a more concise report to bring to the general meeting. If there's committees that are meeting in between the general meeting that we want to kind of report on the status of the committee and some proposals that are coming out of the committee, that can be brought to this body. And also too, if there is expenses that were not decided at a general meeting, small expenses under $200, we can vote on them at the board meetings. If we're going to, for instance, do an impromptu coffee hour, or if there was a petty cash expense that was needed in relation to an event or so on and so forth, we can decide on them in the board meetings. But of course, we bring that back in our treasurer's report and report it all to the general meeting. The biggest thing to realize, I think, with the board meeting is that even though we're elected leadership, the highest voting body of the PTA is the PTA itself. So we are not the highest voting body. We don't make decisions for the PTA. We are making proposals. We're providing leadership for sure. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're promoting parent engagement and people are really feeling ownership over the PTA, because that's when we see the best results, right? The more parents that we have engaged, the more that people feel like they're part of the community, the more that people feel like they have the influence over the decisions being made, the better we all are for it. And when it's closed door, small group decisions being made, it's never a productive thing. So that's the goal of these meetings. Anyone have any questions around the goals of the meeting? Awesome. Jenny asked in the chat if anyone was taking minutes. We typically don't take minutes of the board meeting. We record them so we have for future reference, but we usually don't take minutes of the board meetings, just because, you know, we're just setting agenda and stuff like that. But we can take, if people want to take minutes or notes rather of the budget conversation, if anyone's inclined to do that, that could be for helpful for sure.
I'm also happy to afterwards write a summary and share that out if we want one just among the board.
Okay, dope. And Lawam, I'm gonna bring it up in the second half when we have the board meeting about the AI app. I want to see if people are cool with bringing in the AI app for some of that transcribing and note taking, but we want to get everyone's consensus on that before we start bringing in artificial intelligence. Cool, awesome. So, and again, typically these board meetings are board members, and then our Title I chairs and alternates are non-voting members of the board. And what that means as a non-voting member is that if there's any decisions related to money, if we're taking any votes related to money, the Title I folks do not have a vote on that. But Title I, you can feel free to have all the input on the process that you want. It's just when we have the actual votes. What else? I think that's it, right? Am I missing anything for folks who've been on the board? All right, cool. Awesome. So the first thing we're gonna do, and why this is a little bit of a special meeting, is we're gonna go over our proposed budget. I'll share my screen in a little bit. But explaining this again, I explained it to some of y'all in one-on-ones that we've had. But the proposed budget, or the budget itself, what it's for is, this is the document that we use to kind of guide our major expenses and major fundraising plans for the year. So this is not exhausting all the events or things we will use money on throughout the year, but these are the major things. And the reason that they're on this list is because there are things that we have done historically, or proposals that people have made at prior meetings. And, you know, also there's a lot of mindfulness tied to capacity. So we try to be very intentional about not building out too many things so that we strain ourselves, exhaust ourselves, because undoubtedly there will be things to stress out about in between these things. But these are the major broad strokes. And the reason we put it together is so that, one, we can bring it to the general PTA and everyone can review it, have feedback on it, and also we can then vote on it. And it's a good way to vote in a bunch of activities that we want to do that year, versus each meeting being dominated by a vote on a different event. We just do it at the beginning of the process. And then also too, it becomes a way to kind of keep us on track, so we don't divert too much and we don't, you know, start planning too many things. And what we're trying to do this year, that we've had some success with in prior years, is really, you know, get those save the dates out. So y'all have all seen all the Google Calendar invitations that I've sent to y'all. Those are not fixed dates. Those are the dates that we saw on the calendar that may work. So we can definitely revise those dates, but we want to try to get as many dates in advance as possible. It also helps with our coordination, obviously, with our, did we lose somebody? Oh, Yulissa. It helps with coordination with our school leadership team, right? So like if we have to get any permits and we need support from Dave or Jody, if there's rooms that we need access to. Also, it helps us coordinate with our partners at TNS. So there's some spaces that are shared spaces that we utilize, or, you know, activities that are in this, you know, similar lane that we don't want to group too close together, right? Like, it's the worst thing if you walk into the school and there's like 2 bake sales happening at the same time. It's just, it doesn't help anybody. So if we get this stuff out in advance, we can kind of also have some good coordination with all our partners. The budget ideally is done at the end of the year prior. Okay, we didn't get it done at the end of last year because we were a little exhausted by the end of last year, but we did do some conversations last year and that influenced this document. But ideally, the budget is done at the end of the year. It's voted on at the end of the year. And that way the new incoming board is set up. All right, this is already voted upon. I'm good to go. We're lucky that we have some board members who are still around. So the continuity is still there. We didn't lose it. But imagine this was a brand new board, 6 brand new people, and you just had no kind of guidance. That's like a bad position to be in. So ideally, we just want to keep it on our radar that at the end of this year, we want to make this happen. Maybe trying to even form a budget committee. There's also a mid-year point where we do reflection on this budget and we give an updated mid-year budget. And when we do that mid-year budget, it's maybe we didn't get as many things as we wanted to get done, or we're surpassing expectations, so on and so forth. We do some small revisions, and then we really want to finalize what our budget for the rest of the year will be by February or March. That's ideally the timeline. The budgets too, even though they're all parent voted upon, we want to make sure that that's getting turned into our district office and our principal and vice principal. So that is full transparency on what we're doing. So that's the budget process. So right now, what we're hoping to do is review the proposed budget that we have in front of us. We've invited David and Jody to also give some insight and thoughts on what they would like to see from their end and where we might be able to support them. And then we're going to, based on the conversation tonight, tweak it however makes sense. And then when we go to our October 10th meeting, I forget the date, next Tuesday, when we go to our Tuesday meeting, we're going to do a formal presentation of the budget to the PTA at large, and then we'll do an official vote at the PTA meeting. That all makes sense for everybody? Any questions about it? Okay, dope. So let me do a screen share here. Okay. So I send the link in the chat. So open it up on your browser if you can, but if not, you can also follow along on the screen here, whatever is easiest. So just explaining this really quickly. So right now, our beginning balance in our bank account is $22,632.67. That's what's in our bank account, or was as of 9/23. I think there might have been like a $5 expense on one of our subscriptions for one of our services. But generally it's around 22,600, which is a pretty good place. There's been times where they've been, right, like Jenny, you would know the best. There's been times when we had like 15 grand in there, or right. So we've had some pretty good successful fundraising years in the past 2 to 3 years, I would say, some pretty significant fundraising. So yeah, so that's a good number, but of course we'd always like to get in a better place. And I would say primarily our fundraising has been through events. We've gotten a couple of donations of like anywhere from like $500 to $2,000, but those haven't been that consistent. So we don't have it reflected in this budget that we're expecting a $2,000 contribution or anything like that. But that does happen. We have talked about our fundraising committee being relaunched, and fundraising committee really trying to be more proactive with asking for donations and asking and even applying for grants, but that's not usual practice right now, but hopefully we can get there. So that 22,000 is mostly through activities and then some small donations. The Scholastic bucks, just to explain that number, so we have $9,378.12 in Scholastic bucks. What that is when we do our Scholastic book fairs, so we do around 2 a year, sometimes 3. Our Scholastic book fairs are great obviously as a resource and for fundraising. And they really are engaging. The thing about the Scholastic Book Fair, though, is we're just taking a percentage of the earnings. So obviously the stuff that's being sold, we're not getting a full return on that, right? Scholastic is getting the majority of it. We have the option at the end of the fair, depending on how much we have sold, how much revenue was brought in at the end of the fair, we have the option to collect our percentage in regular money, in regular dollars, but only 25% can be collected if we do it that way. Or we have the option to collect it in Scholastic dollars, where that revenue split can be as high as 55%, depending on how high we've gone in a metric. So there's been years where we'll collect it as cash. There's been years that we've collected as Scholastic dollars, Scholastic bucks. And that's something we voted upon as a PTA. The reason that the Scholastic bucks are cool is because we can then purchase from the Scholastic catalog, and the Scholastic catalog obviously has tons of books, but there's also other things like, furniture and software apps and digital libraries that we can purchase for like a year access to all the graphic novels for fifth graders, stuff like that. There's like really cool things that we can do with the Scholastic bucks. So that's what that number is, but we split them so it's not confusing, right? That's not real, but it's money, but it's not the same as green money. It's blue money. So then on this first page starting on this first page is anticipated income. So this is the income coming in, not necessarily earnings. That's important to realize. Because for instance, Picture Day, you see Picture Day has $2,000. We don't collect anything off of Picture Day. So you're gonna see then on anticipated expenses, Picture Day, we actually are losing money. We're taking $2,500 out of our bank account. Does anybody realize why that might be?
We might be supporting some of our needier families with pictures.
Yeah, so that's us subsidizing some families through PTA money. So anticipated income is the stuff that's coming into the bank account. We got to take note of that, of course. For those who don't know, the Star Academy PTA is a 501c3. So we're a nonprofit organization. We are, our own entity. We file our own taxes. So we got to report on all this stuff. So this paperwork is really helpful for that. So this is our anticipated income. And so we have Halloween movie night, which is something that we've been doing annually, which is a great event that we do, a movie night, and then we have like a costume party component to it. Then of course, Picture Day is in there, Scholastic Book Fair. Our Scholastic Book Fair right now, the dates that we have held for that are the final week of November, right, Jenny? After the Thanksgiving
Yes,
break?
after Thanksgiving break, that week until I think is the 27th to December 1st. I have to speak with our Scholastic rep. I actually have a meeting with her on Friday. I'll let you know. But it's already in solidified. The books will usually, we can go over that and I'll send out more details, but the books will then be sent out after the meeting with the rep and all that stuff. So the dates are usually sent out and I usually send it out to administration. So, when to expect the books, and we reserve the, dance room.
Right, and the Scholastic Book Fair too, that week is important because that's the last week that we can be ensured that the books will be mailed to families before the end of December holidays, which a lot of families, they like to purchase books because they know that they can gift them during the December holidays. So that's why we're trying to squeeze it in then, even though it's kind of aggressive because we have the Picture Day and all that kind of stuff. We have enough experience with the book fair that we feel like it might not be too big of a lift. And as I'm going through this list of stuff too, one of the other things that the former board thought through with this is like really just like one major event a month. So there's some that there's like maybe 2 major events, but really just trying to keep it to 1. So the Kindness Gram, for those who haven't been around for this, is an annual event that we do around Valentine's Day. We used to call this Candy Gram, but we changed it to Kindness Gram because we diversified the things that we sold. Like we were just selling like chocolate roses and candies that people could send as a gram to the room that they wanted to send it to. And we like deliver it to the classrooms, which is really fun. But this is a Kindness Gram. This is an event that is explicitly a fundraiser for our 5th grade graduation class. So this one, you'll see that there's 1,200 coming in, but then there's a payout of the same. We don't earn anything off of this event. This is fully to support the 5th grade. Then we have our Mother's Day bake sale. We used to do like more regular bake sales, but we proposed this year just doing one major one. Let me step back. We actually, the conversation that we had the last board was that we were doing too many fundraisers. Not too much fundraising, too many fundraisers. Let me explain. We were doing a fundraiser like every month. We were trying to, do a pitch to our parent community, raise money. And what we were finding was, one, it's hard to sustain that, a monthly activity. It's hard to engage parents on that. But 2, it's a big ask from our community to be donating funds on a monthly basis. And what we decided, and we can discuss it now, it's not anything that's too rigid, but we were like, let's scale back the amounts of fundraisers we're doing, and the fundraisers that we do, we do them big. So that, people know these are the 3 major fundraisers we're doing this year, and we do them big, and we try to, bring in our fundraising goals for those, 3 events. And then of course there's always fundraising that happens at a smaller scale at other events. Like for instance, our Halloween movie night is not a explicitly fundraiser, but we sell popcorn and, little hand foods, and we take donations at the door. So there's a fundraising component, but it's not a fundraiser. It's a family event. Does that make sense? Anyone have any thoughts on that? On the question, on like this question of like amount of fundraisers?
I don't have a question, but I love the idea of reducing the frequency and strengthening the impact each time. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's less, also it's probably just less like annoying for everybody involved to not have that constant stimulus. But I think it'd be great if I mentioned this, I think, to you, Sean, but I think it'd be great if there was something that was just sort of like merch or whatever that is sort of ongoing, that is always available, but there's no like there's no constant push. Maybe there's a push at events, but something that is just like a slow availability all the time to sort of bridge that gap as well. And I'm not committed to the idea of merch. That was a thing that easily came to mind.
How does this work? How do you enthusiastically support the idea of merch? Because I'd like to. I love that idea. Throwing it out there.
Can I speak on this really quick?
Yeah.
It was something that actually I was talking with Sean about, and I'm glad y'all brought it up. And I was going to present this after this budget portion of the meeting. But there is a website that was started by a PTA dad that we can bring in, and they do the website portion of it. They actually do the marketplace. They create it all, and all we have to do is like post it up, and it gets delivered directly to the door.
Oh, that's amazing.
They can help with designing of t-shirts and sweatshirts. They even have this like coffee fundraiser where we can put our logo on coffee bags and parents can purchase all year round. So it's actually a pretty cool website that I wanted to share.
Love
Which
that.
I can put in the chat, and then everybody can take a look at it and see if it's something that you think would work for us. It really is little work on our end. We just need someone to like be the person checking in and seeing if all the orders are going through okay. And it's just like really kind of a passive thing, but maybe something to consider since it's being brought up.
I love that idea. I also, when I was thinking about this the other day, I mocked up some rough ideas for t-shirts, or like whatever, some other things too, but t-shirts were the easy thing to mock up. But so I'm of course not at my desk now, I'm on the move, but I can send those out in response to that, Jenny.
Awesome. Jody, didn't we have the winner of like the logo?
I was gonna say I have the logo winner, and then we did have some merch years ago when we kind of had like optional uniforms. So we do have some graphic designs that kind of match like the star that's your PTA star. We had a few different ones. We had sweatshirts, we had t-shirts. Some people had like wanted like baseball hats. So I love that idea. We had done it with cookies, but happy to do like a more local business owner that's like a more personal thing. But I'm sure I could find some of those images if we wanted those to start with, or we could have kids design or think about what items that people want. Do they want like little tote bags, that kind of stuff? And then the other thing I was going to share was I know some PTAs in our district, sorry, instead of doing just like a ton of fundraisers, they basically said to parents, like, we don't want to harass you with a ton of fundraisers. We kind of know that's annoying. But we know that there's people who want to contribute to the school. And so they basically kind of created a completely optional, but like PTA dues. And they did it by income scale. And so they said, like, if you make this amount to this amount, like, this is the suggested donation. If you make this amount to this amount, this is the suggested donation. And so like the smallest one might be like $5 for the entire year, because that's what those people can contribute. But we've definitely had parents at our school who, like, you know, they are financially stable, and if not, like maybe even affluent, who are like, no one's ever asked me for money, but like I would have, right? Like we had parents for the after school who were like, I could have sponsored another family because I would have loved to do that, but no one's ever like asked me just for money. And so that might be an interesting way. Is like, I know dues, typically we haven't really done much with them, but I think if we did a really beautiful framing, like some of our families, and I could share the example, it's from Tompkins Middle School, right? So like all of our families get free after school with University Settlement because we're a Title I school, right? So even families who don't qualify for Title I benefit from our free after school, which normally they would pay for. And so his letter did like a really beautiful job of framing some of the things that all children get for free that normally in schools you'd have to pay for. And so like, if you were able to, here's ways that you could support other kids or families in our school. And then they have like the sliding scale of donations. And so that might be something that we can think about, that way it's not events for fundraisers, but it's really about like, how are we marketing, who the PTA is, how are they supporting families, how are families supporting each other within our community.
That's great. I want to cut us off though, because we're getting into fundraising committee conversations and we'll be here all night with good ideas. Ulissa, though, you haven't talked, and I saw you wanted to talk.
I just wanted to say really quick, maybe another thing of, instead of, you know, a lot of families can't afford to give any type of money, but some parents might have extra shirts lying around that their kids instantly grow out of, all of a sudden, that they hit a growth spur and they have a shirt that their kids worn 2 and 3 times and still looks fairly new, or pants. You know, maybe we could accept also clothing donation to where families who don't have can come in and, you know, go through certain things, and we could, even if we have to, you know, little by little wash things, fold them, put them there, just so that anyone can give anything that they feel would help. You know, hats, coats, gloves, just anything.
I could personally provide this right now. We moved from a house in Atlanta to an apartment in Bushwick. I literally was going to talk to Sean about this tomorrow, not to derail us more, Sean, but just, I have so much stuff that I was literally like, who do I talk to about this kid stuff that's still good that I have no room for? I don't want to just take it to the thrift store. I'd love for it to go to Star People. I love that idea. So
Yeah,
many
I literally have coats in my house. I have two
Yeah.
bags that I just got from another parent that have like brand new sneakers in them. I was just gonna bring them to the school just in case that we could have them to the side. You know, just keep them in the office. A kid goes in, they're cold, they don't have a sweater, anything. You know, we could give them something, and hopefully that later on we can figure something out where we can really help more. And I have a couple of ideas about that as well that we could get into another time. But that's just something that I wanted to also put out there.
I think it'd be great to kind of like create something conjoined with the current pantry where we could have like clothing and then food and just kind of
Yeah.
create like wraparound service for like
Yeah,
families that
definitely.
need the space and just
Yeah.
get what they need, any essentials.
Yeah.
Great idea.
All right, cool, great. We're definitely gonna talk more about this. We've been talking about the clothing swap for a while. Just to answer some of the questions in the chat. So we do allocate funds for the book fair to get for families that need it. We usually are also very giving during the fair. We want to make sure that every child that comes into the fair gets a book. We also want to coordinate with Shy this year and ensuring that all the students do come to the fair. I know we were fearful in years past of kids coming and not having funds or not having Scholastic Bucks, but we're going to be allocating more funds for that this year, and we are ordering more Spanish books for sure. So but yeah, we'll talk more about that in our Scholastic book
Quickly,
fair.
don't
we're gonna
forget
get-
about Ukrainian books if we can.
Yeah.
For there's some Ukraine children in there.
True.
Just don't forget.
Yep, great idea.
But one question, I'm
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. I think, would it be possible for us to come to a consensus in terms of what is the eligibility as well? Like that it could be like clear and transparent for students to like be eligible for some of these free Scholastic books. I feel like some families might have some questions about it. So I just want to like be clear with it and
So we've
Sure, there's-
historically leaned on you guys to let us know because we're not privy to all that information, nor do we want to be inquiring with parents. So if y'all can create a system that makes sense on your end and communicate to us, I think that would be the best way, you know.
Yeah,
Well, we
that
did-
usually is done in coordination with Shy. You know, Shy is a really big support system during the book fair, and she usually comes down with those students and identifies them in a very discreet manner. So it's not like they shop along with the rest of their class. It's just we kind of like, you know, on our end, use our Scholastic Bucks during the fair to just comp a lot of things out. And it's really not an issue. We try
Well,
to make it just like it's not a thing, and so like everybody has the same experience.
Yeah, no, but I'm just kind of like thinking through, I'm not implying like to share that information, but maybe like come to a consensus. Is it only like the students in temporary housing that will get these funds? Or is it students
I
in
think-
temporary housing and like families that make less than $30,000 a year? Like it kind of like creating a sort of like, you know, something clear where
I
how
think
we're
we could probably decide that and then propose that to the PTA if those parameters sound good, like who should qualify for those supports, because that also comes into play later. Like I know in the past sometimes, well, we'll get to it when we go to expenses, but I was going to think about like for field trips, right? Sometimes people don't have the funds, so how do we want to allocate the funds? Or for picture day, how do we decide who gets comped? So I think having some criteria on our end that we can message up front is definitely very helpful. So it doesn't feel like it's personal or chosen, or it's not clear how we're deciding those things. So maybe we can talk about that and then we can share that with the board and at the PTA meeting.
Yeah, just looking for transparency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. That's a great point. Other things on the income is just miscellaneous donations, and funds collected at events that we just anticipate from past experience. So now we get into page 2, and what's up, Jen? we're just going through the proposed budget and kind of explaining what it all means. So on the expenses side, so you saw that we had $500
Sorry.
expected.
My button was working. I got it.
No worries.
I'm writing it down. Sorry.
No worries. So we had $500 in income for the Halloween movie night, but we also have expenses, right? We do some upfront purchasing of baked goods and treats and popcorn for the popcorn machine, so on and so forth. We usually allocate around $150 for these type of events. So that's what that is. Picture day payment, I explained, it's going to be in excess because we're subsidizing. There's a proposal from Jody and Dave for an allocation of $900 actually to subsidize families this year. But what we're hoping, why it's only 500 reflected here, is because we are hoping we can negotiate like we have in the past with the photo company to have them subsidize some of those packages. So we don't anticipate the full 900, closer to 500. We also know that the 45 families that we've identified, we know not all of them will take us up on the offer. And so that's where that math kind of shakes out to. Our community dinner. So we used to have an event called Thank Our Lucky Stars. And we wanted to bring something like that back. It's usually before the end of November vacation break. So the Wednesday before that vacation break, we would have a communal potluck. There would be expenses, of course, because we would bring some of the money, some of the food up front, you know, like make sure that there's food there and that we have, you know, something for everybody, regardless if they can contribute a plate or not. But we also make it a potluck kind of component where we ask people to bring contributions. So that's what that $400 is. The Scholastic Book Fair I explained earlier. So literacy give back event, don't disregard the name, but we talked about trying before, so after we do our Scholastic Book Fair, trying to get like a wish list from students on a book that they would want for the holidays, and purchasing a book via our Scholastic Bucks for every child in the school. So that's what that money. Jenny, did you want to add to that? Because I know the Scholastic team was talking about this.
Not unless there's questions on it, but it's still something that is being thought through. This is not a new concept because we've done, like, you know, at the end of the summer where we did, you know, summer reading packets and kits and gave books to kids. But this is like, because there is a good amount of Scholastic books in there, we wanted to kind of figure out more ways, like more maybe Spanish language books, things like that, that there's a need for to use these dollars. And so it's just kind of like going through that, and, you know, whoever's interested in being on the committee, you know, these are ideas that's been mulling in my mind, and I would like to share that, but that's kind of the concept, you know, the idea behind it. So we could talk about that at a, you know, a later date, but if you have questions, I can answer.
Then the next one is the Teatro C assembly. This is actually mistitled because I thought we were doing this one, but there was another assembly that we were looking around at this $600 price point. Jody had questions because in the past, the $600 price point for a teatro was only for like a one-man show in a classroom versus the full assembly is closer to like $2,000. But we want to support more assemblies at the school. So we're hoping that Jody and David have some ideas around that. So that number could change based on this conversation right now. The other things are honorariums for people who we're going to invite to do some workshops for our parents. So one of them is during tax season, we want to do a parent financial workshop, so people can do, you know, budgeting and their taxes and all that kind of stuff. And we want to do one in English and in Spanish. We're trying to see, we have people in our community who are down to donate their time, but we want to always make sure that even if someone donates their time, we're giving them some kind of give back as a thank you. So that's what those $200 are. And then, of course, for the racial equity forum that we want to do right before Black History Month. And we've done other stuff like this for parents. Jody brought in some great organizations in the past to help with this kind of stuff. So we have a lot of good people in our community to help with these conversations, catered specifically to families, you know, and speaking about racial equity also in our schools. Then the kindness grant, I explained, it's an expense because we give all the money back to the 5th grade. Then we have, we're trying to do like a resource fair around Earth Day. And so we will be inviting different organizations that do work around recycling, composting, you know, anything renewable, reusable, all that kind of stuff. And trying to organize a fair, not a lot of expenses from us up front because it's more going to be like a tabling event. Then we do our annual teacher appreciation breakfast. That's during Teacher Appreciation Day or week. It's on the calendar, and that costs us around $300. We basically cater a breakfast for you know, the staff, not only the teachers. So maybe we should turn that to staff appreciation breakfast. I don't know. Then we the next bake sale we have is the Mother's Day bake sale around Mother's Day. Obviously a very popular holiday to sell baked goods. And then the big expenses at the end of the year are trying to stay consistent with what we did last year and what we used to do some years prior, is really make sure we have that great send-off event at the end of the year. We did a really dope carnival fair event for the families and for the local community last year. It was really awesome. So we want to make sure we do that again this year. So that's what those expenses are at the end. DJs, services, permits, all that kind of stuff. The board miscellaneous expenses line is just the calculation of the $200 per month number I talked about. But again, we usually don't do this, you know, it's never really every month that we're doing a $200 vote, but just so that we account for it, we put it in the budget. All right, that was long and sorry, it took a little longer than I was hoping, but is there any initial thoughts, questions, ideas? Maybe we can spend the next 11 minutes on that. And then if the board are down to stay on, we have a bunch of stuff to go over agenda-wise for our next meeting. Go for it, Jody.
One thing I was thinking about that we had done in the past that I wasn't sure if it would be a possible expense is to create a fund to support families with field trips. So this year and last year, now that COVID is over and we can go on field trips, we've really been trying to encourage classes to even like go on like one field trip a month or every other month. But for our families in temporary housing, like we have to figure out like how to pay for their dues. So I wasn't sure if we thought about once we create like that criteria that we're going to use for photos or for the book fair, if an expense might be one that the PTA was willing to support is supporting a certain amount of money per child for field trips or something like that. Some years we've done it per class, a certain amount, but I think it makes sense to have the money with the child versus the class, if that makes sense. So, you know, I just wanted to put that out there to see if that was something that might be doable.
Jamie.
So I've worked in advertising sales my whole career before this, so I always believe everybody's got tons of money, and I don't believe it should be like parents or teachers that are supposed to have to do it. The school that we went to previously, and Sean, I'll talk to you about this tomorrow, but in Atlanta, they tapped grandparents, aunts, uncles, local community. They were shameless, and it worked really well. Like, and especially like Star Academy, that's a whole brand. Like, theirs was Bolton Academy, which people thought was named after Michael Bolton, which is hilarious. It was not. But like Star Academy in the East Village, like that's a brand. And like my husband, for instance, like he works for Papa John's. So like, and this is New York, there's probably a million parents that have cool affiliations and partnerships. And I love what you said about Jody, about how you brought in other partners before. So I guess I'm just curious about like, as time goes on, like these budgets are super like kind and not overtapping the parents, but I would love to, if and when the time comes, just talk about like ideas of how we can branch out and not tap the parents or the teachers or whatever, like, and we all have, it makes me think of like stuff they used to do like at my church growing up. It was like donate your time, your treasure, or your talent. You guys heard that? Like everybody has something they can give. And then there's just so much, you know, so many communities that would love to support a school like Star, even just for the PR reasons. Like, I don't know. So if and when that time comes, like, I feel like all these are such like lovely, amazing ways to enrich the school and the community. Like, I feel like there's so much money for stuff like this, that's so good intention with such a, you know, amazing supportive community. Anyway, so if and when those fundraising talks start, I was just interested in like, you know, we could find out what parents work at what companies who have money for this kind of thing. And then like, even just around the community, there's so much money around the Star Academy location. Anyway, so I just feel very enthused about this wonderful calendar and want to support if and when the time comes to do so.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So this budget is not reflective of these kind of fundraising ideas that we've had. And that is a separate conversation for sure, because we want to relaunch our fundraising committee and exhaust these ideas. And we have actually like new board members, new Title I members who are like grant writers who have experience, you know, doing fundraising for their professional reasons. So I think we're going to have like a great fundraising committee. And also too, the numbers that are reflected here kind of put us in the red, because we want to do a little bit more give back this year. So it's going to be even more motivation to bring in fundraising in another way. But for sure, that's not tonight. We're not going to talk too much about that tonight, but those are great points, Jamie. Yulissa, you had your hand up and then you lowered it.
I did, but it was pertaining to what she was talking about the fundraiser, and that's a conversation for another
Yo,
time.
everyone's
So I put my
hyped. I got a
hand
lot of
up.
ideas. I love it. I love it. I love it. We're gonna make it happen. Awesome. Anyone have thoughts on, I saw Lawam, you said in the chat that you love the idea of supporting field trips. Did you want to expound on that or ask any follow-up questions to Jody?
No, I just like to, I mean, I think it's exactly what Jody was saying about it. Once they determine the criteria and we have a better sense for numbers, you know, how many people would qualify, and then we could allocate the funds appropriately. But I think, you know, aligning with the excitement around fundraisers, it seems like we will be able to achieve that with this budget that seems like great. And I think conservative for how much enthusiasm we have around fundraising this year. And so I think we can, I support that. I was always asking in our class last year about how to help support our classroom field trips. And so I like the idea of making it more centrally for looking at the school broadly rather than breaking it down to the classroom.
Yes, great. Just, I guess, throwing it back to Jody and David, I love this idea of a field trip support fund. But for our budget, do you have like a rough number of what you think might work for? Like, are we talking like 1,000, 2,000, like something that we can put on this budget before next Tuesday?
I mean, I'm just like literally throwing out like the most random number ever. Because I'm thinking, I know that we have 35 kids to 40 in shelters, but that doesn't mean they're the only ones in temporary housing, right? So we have heard kids who also were. And so even if we allocated, I'm just saying like $20 for an entire year, right? That would be mom math right now.
Like
brain is
$1,000.
about 1,000. So like even like if we even said 1,500, that would probably be more than enough. And there's some classes that go on more, some that go on less, some that go on more free ones, some that are more expensive. But if we just had that amount put to the side, and then we can think about how to use it equitably, I think that would be a great starting place.
Yeah, the 1,500 I think it makes sense, and also too, again, we can refine these things. We're not locked into any of these things, but just so that we can present something next Tuesday, I think the 1,500 is a nice strong number. And there's some logic tied to it. It's not super random, Jody. You did good. You did good with the math. All right, awesome. So that's an amendment to put on there. Anyone else have anything like that they can think of? Jody, for some historic context, I know we used to support more of the regular assemblies in years past. What did that look like financially?
Okay, in the past, we used to work with a company called the Bureau of Lecturers, and they provided, like, imagine like old school like assemblies, like when we brought the animals in and we had like the exotic animal pep rally, or like the Chinese acrobats or the African drummers. And they used to, like, as the PTA, you could like almost like buy like a package. So like the more assemblies you bought from them, the cheaper than the cost per assembly was. So I want to say like for like $1,000 or $1,200, we'd get like 3 assemblies that then we could like pick out from their list of assemblies, and then we coordinate the dates from. We actually had a credit from them because we had bought a bunch the year that COVID happened, and they were scheduled, and obviously they canceled. And me being me, like the past 2 years, like every year I write them and I'm like, hey guys, remember us? Like we have a credit with you guys. But I'm pretty sure they shut down because like they don't even have a website anymore. But I do think that there's other companies like them out there that like have traveling shows kind of that then you can book. And so in the past, that's what it kind of looked like. It was a company that had the yo-yo trick guy or the magic trick guy, or I remember kids remember the laser guy, where literally it was like a rave in our auditorium and our kids like thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it was like a laser show. So you'd have to do some research to see like who the new companies are, because I don't think the one that we worked with existed. But our kids loved them. They were normally like 50-minute shows. They were during the school day, but families were invited to join. They were a lot of fun.
Yeah, maybe we can do some research on our end to see if we can. I know Jenny started some of that research with the arts stuff, but yeah, we can continue some of that. Maybe we won't have it ready for Tuesday, but maybe we can say that we're looking into how the PTA can support some more assemblies this year, just so that people are up for it later on.
Oh, just to add to that, I don't even know if this would even be like an actual thing that, kids from school could go and do. But I remember last year, Sean and Jenny and our kids went to something that was like on Avenue B right behind Tompkins, and it was like a mini circus that they did. Do you guys remember that? It was free. And they had like acrobatics, and like they had jugglers and like a magician, and it was free to the community. And but I mean, it was also like on a weekend. But I mean, if we can't get something, that we can expense out, that is also another option. I don't know if they're still doing it this year, but that was really fun. And it's also community based too.
Yeah, they're consistently like getting booked at a lot of these like events and like community events that happen in the neighborhood. It's the Bindlestiff Circus, and so like
that's what it is. Yeah.
We can reach out to them and see what can be worked out, if that's something that is of interest. If folks, Jody, and I think that's something the school would enjoy.
We also years ago did family field trips. Like we did one a year, like on a weekend. And another thing the PTA used to do pre-COVID was we rented out the ice skating rink in Central Park on a Sunday every single year. And so I think the school contributed half, and then the PTA contributed half. At the time, it was like $1,600 to rent for 2 hours, and then families, they just paid for their own skates, but if they had skates, they could skate for free. And that was like an amazing, I mean, we did that since I was a teacher, since like 2004 was we rented out the ice skating rink. But then once again, that stopped during COVID, and we just hadn't picked it back up yet, because I think last year was the first year even the rink reopened or something. So, those would be under expenses, but that could also be something we think about as we get closer.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I see David on the stack, and then we're at time for our budget conversation. but David, maybe you could close us out here.
Sure, I just wanted to like chip in terms of thinking about the essentials for some of our more vulnerable students. We might potentially be able to use some Title I funds with this, so the PTA doesn't necessarily need to fund all of it. But I'm thinking like in that locker, we could order like sweaters, we could have socks available, we could have like sneakers, potentially we could have like umbrellas. Some of those essentials in that locker that we're talking about, and I'm not sure the PTA would be able to fund some of that. But we might be able to look into different options once we have a different budget allocation to see where we're at.
So, I looked into it a little bit, and Title I funds can definitely cover certain things like that, like a resource room, as long as it benefits the entire school. But we can look into having donors and using some Title I funds and things like that. That's one of the things that I had in mind that I've already spoken with some of the PTA about. Definitely.
Yeah, and that, I mean, for those who are a little confused on that and haven't been part of those conversations, Title I, because it's federal money, has different rules tied to it versus PTA, which is, you know, up to our discretion as an organization, how we want to use the funds that we collect. It's different, different ways to decide that how the money is used, basically. But there is no limitation on how we can combine forces, right? Like if there is something that is stimulated by Title I funds, which is not a lot, it's, you know, on average around $2,000 a year, stimulates some greater project that then can be PTA funded through all this amazing fundraising that we're thinking about. And also if it's like a special project that we're doing this year in response to, you know, migrant families and, you know, increased need in the district, all these kind of things, that could be really beautiful. So that there's no limits on that. It's just how we decide how to use that Title I funds is separate from how PTA decides how to use its funds. Cool. And then, I mean, that's perfect. I see Jody had to jump off. But yeah, I think we'll close out this and David will excuse you in a little bit. But the one thing I wanted to talk about before you jump off, David, if you have a second, is there has been concerns around transparency with the use of PTA and Title I funds. So we want to make sure that we're just being transparent and talking about them in our meetings. And, you know, if anyone has any questions or concerns, we can bring them up really quickly now. So I think just for some historic context here, around 6 or 7 years ago, there was some mismanagement of PTA funds that resulted in investigation of the PTA. This is before any of our times here on the call, but you know, it's something that happens, right? When there's volunteer organizations and there's money being moved around, things happen, people start pointing fingers. It ended up shaking out that no blame was placed on any individuals. Our old principal, you know, who kind of they were saying that she mismanaged the money, she was cleared of, you know, any kind of wrongdoing and all these kind of things. And since then, we have been extremely tight with our finances. Our reporting system is extremely tight. Every time we do fundraisers, when we count money, we do it two witnesses counting money. When we do bank deposits at the bank, withdrawals, we have slips for all the withdrawals, deposits. If we take anything through our PayPal, we document how much is being forwarded to our bank account. Our bank account is tied to our PTA, not an individual. So it's under our nonprofit organization. Star Academy PTA is our bank account. We have 3 signatories. So it's our president, vice president, and treasurer are people that can sign off. And we have to have 2 for every time there's a withdrawal. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about it, and if people had any questions, we talked about it. There's also questions around Title I funds and mismanagement of Title I funds. We have had history of Title I funds being used for activities that necessarily weren't what Title I were approved for. And there's been some looseness on that, both on the Title I committee's end and also on the DOE District 1's end. But we've been trying to get better and make sure that Title I money is being used correctly, because there's a reason why we get Title I funds. We want to make sure that it's being used for the proper reasons. But there is no investigations of mismanagement of funds. I just want people to be super clear. And we've heard rumors of staff members saying that there's been investigations and that there's mismanagement of money. And we're hoping, David, that you can support and like getting rid of those rumors, because it could be very problematic. If someone thinks that the PTA is mismanaging money, then we do a fundraiser and people are not going to contribute, And I'm not saying any names of who some of these characters are, but there's some individuals who can be a little divisive in these kind of spaces. And we want to make sure that toxic behavior is not only, it's just not allowed, it's not permitted, because this takes so much work and effort for us to do this volunteer work for our children, that people smearing our names and trying to say certain things about certain people is just like toxic behavior that there's no room for. Like if there's a meeting, someone's trying to like get at someone and they getting taken out of the meeting, we don't have room for toxic behavior. So did anyone have any questions or thoughts on that? Or any responses to that?
Sounds like we might need a rebranding campaign for the PTA. That could be fun.
I think it's already rebranded. I think you guys are doing great work.
But telling people like everything's brand new, whatever. And I'm going to talk to you about this tomorrow, Sean, but like I have a workspace right nearby that I go to in the East Village, and I get like infinite free printing. Like, so there's things that we can leverage like that from each of us, I'm sure too. I know, right? I just saw your saw the expressions. I couldn't believe it either. I'm like, I'll keep this just for that. But anyway, things like that we can tap into too. But I think all the things you're saying like that, people have to believe in the PTA. They have to.
Yeah.
And be psyched about it.
And also the Title I funds. I know unfortunately Jody had to hop off, but I just wanted to make it clear that I've seen what we can and cannot use the money for. So thanks to Sean, he gave me that information. So I'll be able to make copies and give whoever needs that information to them, so that we know what we can and can't do, which don't ask Title I to go ice skating because we can't use the money for that. Sorry. But there's other things that we can do with it that are still great and still awesome. So we're just not taking any field trips with Title I money.
Yeah, for sure. And also, just to be clear, there's no tarnished reputation. There's one individual who is saying these rumors that we want to make sure, it's not like there's this big thing like, oh, PTA is up to, no, we are very successful PTA. People love the PTA. People contribute financially and with their hours. So yeah, rebranding is always good, but there's nothing there. It's just
even better.
Yeah. I mean, so for full transparency, there was an issue last year because there was a grouping of fifth grade parents who wanted to do fundraising for the fifth grade class and really wanted to force the hand of the PTA to steer a lot of our fundraising towards fifth grade fundraising. But like Yulissa was saying, we can't do fundraising exclusively all the time for one particular body of the school. While we do our once a year big contribution to the fifth graders and they partner with us on that event, we can't make too many events. So what we told the fifth grade grouping, it wasn't the fifth grader parents, it was a group of parents. We said, hey, if y'all want to do independent fundraisers, of course, y'all can do it. You know, there's no conflict. Anyone can do a fundraiser. But if you want to do it through the PTA, it has to go through the proper channels of approval. There also has to be a free-flowing discussion on how the funds are used. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to do stuff independent. It's fine. They did stuff independently. There was mishandling of money because they don't have the same systems as us. They don't have a centralized bank account. And so, you know, the people take for granted how structured the PTA is and how much work we put into keeping it tight. They tried to do it independently. It wasn't that great. They mishandled money and people started arguing about it. It had nothing to do with us. We were like, oh, we told y'all should have just did it through us. So this year, we're actually forming a 5th grade committee via the PTA so that it is more centralized and more supported, because Brenda, who is our sergeant at arms, is also a 5th grade parent this year and very enthusiastic about supporting there. Any other questions or comments on any of that stuff?
Any support you guys need from the school administratively, let me know. Willing to support in any way.
We need a room.
That's a separate conversation. But it is, I mean, it is tied to finances. It is tied to finances because right now, our petty cash that we keep on hand at the school, our financial reports is like all over the place. We don't have a filing cabinet, you know, like silly things. Like these shouldn't be issues for such a well-organized organization. So we're gonna fix them this year.
Yeah.
The PTA needs some love.
We'll
Go
buy
ahead.
the filing cabinet and we'll get it going.
And put it in the room.
I mean, I just wanted to chime in on this because as a treasurer and having to have been part of that convo that happened last year with the 5th grade grouping of parents, there is no such thing. I mean, there was a lot of things of the bylaws being brought up. Our bylaws are very in line with the chancellor's rules of regulation, right? So there's a lot of things in there that we have to follow via, you know, the DOE. And so if again, people want to do things independently, they can totally do that, but we are not responsible for collecting. And that was what was basically trying to happen, is that they were trying to have me collect the money and put it into our bank account. And it got really messy. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. Feel free, like Sean said, to figure that out amongst yourselves. And so there was some hostility with us kind of like taking a firm stance on saying no, because it was a lot of moving parts that we were not a part of, and nor were we actually asked to be included in. So just moving forward, you know, so everybody understands. But we're all good. You know, there's, you know, hopefully moving forward, if people have questions, you know, hopefully you don't, because, you know, everything is kosher on our end. But feel free to, like, you know, ask. But I will not be taking money from anyone if it's not, you know, has to do with actual PTA fundraising or anything like that, just so you know, for the record, since we're being recorded.
Yeah, it just messes up our taxes too, you know, just bringing in random money, and, you know, it was a couple of issues there, but yeah, thanks so much for that, David. Thanks so much for your support on that. And yeah, I think David will excuse you, and then we'll spend the last 15 minutes going through our other stuff, our other things.
You guys, see you
Thank
tomorrow.
you, Ron. Thank you.
Bye. Do you continue recording or?